Hello and welcome. My name is Joshua McMillon. I am the CEO and co-founder of ROOTEDin, a limited liability company, and ROOTEDin H.O.P.E, a nonprofit organization. And this is the ROOTEDin Generational Wealth Podcast. My prayer is that this podcast brings value to anyone who is willing to listen in the form of knowledge and wisdom that can not only be used in the current present, but also can be used for future generations to come. With that being said, it is only right, if we're speaking about generational wealth, that I first bring my mother, Dr. Gwendolyn McMillon, co-founder of ROOTEDin and ROOTEDin H.O.P.E, a professor of literacy, having served 23 years at Oakland University, the past president of the Literacy Research Association, and the project director for the I Read, I Lead, I Succeed program. Without literacy, it is impossible to create generational wealth for our families. Her research is dedicated to improving the literacy lives of children with a specific focus on Black children. She does this by creating innovative strategies for teaching and for learning. Without further ado, I present to you my mother, Dr. Gwendolyn McMillon.
We company
are
water.
Family.
Company water.
All right, ready?
Mm-hmm.
All right. Dr. Mom, thank you so much for taking the time out to speak with me, have a conversation on generational wealth. This is the Rooted in Generational Wealth podcast. So I want to start light, okay?
Okay.
All right.
Sounds good.
What's a core value that you believe children or adults need to have in order to want to read?
A core value. They have to be interested in exploring. I say that because information is in books. And in order for a person to be motivated to want to read what's in a book, they have to be open to go beyond what they have within themselves. And so they have to be open to exploring.
Open to exploring.
Yeah, wanting to know more about something.
Okay.
And that's one of the things that's really important for us when we're working with children, to help them become interested, or at least build on their interests even,
Right.
that they already have, and then say, let's explore that.
Okay, so I'm thinking like, because for me, I like nonfiction. That's definitely what I lean into. As an adult, when I was younger, I definitely read a lot more fiction. Do you feel like that core value still exists? Like if I'm reading fictional books, or is like, would that be a core value or a motivation in that arena, or is that like?
Yeah, I would still say it's the same. So if you're reading fictional books, it might be a more emotional kind of thing, where some people like love stories. So they want to explore the relationships of somebody, in a book.
Yeah, I got
but
those
they
students.
want to gather information that's outside of themselves.
Okay.
Or even if it's maybe they're experiencing some kind of love relationship situation, and they want to read more about that, even in an informational text, to learn like the types of love languages, for example.
Gotcha.
Because they want to improve their relationship. Or it could be like a love story that's fictional, and it's like an emotional thing. They enjoy reading about that.
Okay.
Or if we're talking children, let's say a little girl is interested in dancing, or a boy interested in dancing, and so they want to explore more about books about dancing and dancers that were successful,
Right.
in the past.
Okay.
Basketball, so you want to learn how to improve your jump shot. So you explore how to do that. So you have to be open to, wanting to open the book or open the computer and explore something that is not necessarily already information that you have, if that makes sense.
Exploration of information.
Yeah.
So I'm an adventurer when I open up a book.
Yes, you are. And you really are. Even when, like, on social media, people are exploring. They're trying to find out about what's happening in other people's lives.
Absolutely.
You're
kind of going into the unknown in a way.
Yeah.
And, hoping you pull something out of it. Every
Yep.
book that I've read, sometimes it's like, I feel like the books that I've read that I walked away from it, like, I didn't enjoy it. It's because I didn't pull something.
Yeah, you didn't want to explore that anymore. It was like,
didn't even
boring.
finish.
I'll keep it moving.
Right. Okay. I'm with you. All right.
That was a good question.
Yeah.
I've never actually thought about that way before.
Yeah, right?
Yeah.
Because everybody picks up a book for a different reason.
Yeah.
I feel like, but there has to be some similarity there.
Mm-hmm.
I think exploration of information I would definitely agree with. Because as a teacher, the kids that I've had that, like, their face is always in a book.
Yes.
It's also a general subject line that they always love to, like, watch. Or, excuse me, even like shows and stuff like that. They'll watch a show or something like that, and also their books will kind of reflect that.
Right.
Yep. So, all right, next question. Can you walk me through your childhood via the lens of elementary, middle, high school, college, so on and so forth? And to add to that, what's your earliest memories that involved reading?
Oh, my goodness. The earliest memory.
Mm-hmm.
There was never a time that I can remember that I didn't have a book in front of me, or somebody was reading a book to me or inviting me to a text. I say that because, as you know, I'm the youngest of 8 children. And having that many older siblings, I loved being read to. So all of the pictures, all of the family pictures, I'm hanging off somebody's neck, sitting in somebody's lap, or doing something related to literacy. So Dad being a pastor, Mom was my primary Sunday school teacher. And so one of the first memories that I have of outside of the home and actually sitting in the laps of my siblings and my parents being read to was in her Sunday school class. And in Mom's Sunday school class, she would read from this red book, and I remember it so vividly. She would read the stories from the Bible, and she would make all the characters come to life. So I looked forward to going to Sunday school because I knew that, Mom was going to read, and that she would ask questions and all of that. But she was an avid reader.
Gotcha.
Only a 9th grade education at that time, but that didn't stop her from making those stories come alive in that primary Sunday school class.
That's fire. Did she, because like, different people, when you're a teacher, you're like some of the kids you're leaning on more. Mm-hmm. Because that was your mom, did she, like, call on you to read, like, way more? Or were you always, your hand was up and you wanted to read? Like, what was...
I was that kid who was always, I'll do it, I'll read. I just love to read because I was a good reader, Mm-hmm. But she did also challenge the other children to participate. So any child that was in Mom's class, I think I must get that from her. Right. Anybody that was in that class was going to read, and if they struggled a bit, she was going to scaffold them and make sure that they had a successful experience. But during this time, we were actually not necessarily reading ourselves. In the primary class, we were like 3, 4, 5 years old. Mm-hmm. So she was reading to us. Gotcha. And then she would let us, like, act it out or whatever. Right. But what happened, I'll make that connection because you asked about my elementary experience. So I was in the pilot group, when President Kennedy started Head Start, there was a pilot. This was 1964, long time ago. In fact, 60 years ago, right now. I was in that summer program. So there were several school districts that were chosen. And for some reason, our school district in Saginaw was chosen to be a site to pilot Head Start. And the purpose of Head Start was to include children who were supposedly at risk, to help them develop skills so that when they went to kindergarten, they would have all those skills. Well, needless to say, when I showed up in Head Start, I already had a lot of those skills, but I had a wonderful teacher, Mrs.
From church you had the skills?
From work, from home, because I was read to at home.
Right.
We had lots of books, like a lot of books.
Access.
And access to books. And Mom read all the time, and my brothers and sisters, as I said. Now, all of the children, that wasn't their experience, but I was blessed to have that. And it wasn't because we were well off, because we actually grew up in what some people call the hood, Mm-hmm. I'm proud of that, though. And we'll talk about that more later.
Yeah, I was about to say where.
Yeah, it was actually, it was on 13th Street in Saginaw, Michigan, which is very much considered an impoverished area, is how other people would describe it. Right. What I describe it as a privileged area, because it's the place where I learned a lot of the things that I know now, to share with the community, to love everybody around you. My best friend was one door down from me, and we're still best friends forever. Yeah. She's, in fact, we work together on everything we do. Mm-hmm. So back to when I started this Head Start program, it was in the summertime. And one of my brothers or sisters would walk me to school. And so we would go in there, and I met Miss Eva White. She was my preschool teacher. Now, she started telling these stories and reading from books and having the same kind of expressions, intonation, and all of that my mom had. So I was like, wow, I love school if this is what school is going to be about. And so she, again, she was a Black woman who followed. This was a predominantly Black school, and she followed that preschool group. The same kids that she had in preschool, she had in first, second, and third grade. And so having that kind of experience was like having a second mother, to all of us. Everybody that was involved in her preschool, first, second, and third grade classes are still actually doing well. We were all great readers. Mm-hmm. The other thing about her that I remember now is at the end of the school year, we're at the end of the school year right now, and I just thinking about this, the memories are coming. She would get a stack of books from her classroom and send them home with me for summer reading.
Okay.
So I remember very well some of the books that I was reading at home were like Childcraft. I would look in some of the encyclopedias and stuff like that. Yeah. But I also had lots of other books. But my teacher, although I had books at home, she specifically found specific books that she wanted me to work on that summer, so that when I came back, when school started again, I would have to report to her on those books that I read over the summer.
Quick side question, encyclopedias were like super expensive back then. How did you get your hands on that? Did your parents buy that? Did you get that from the school? Because that's like the internet before the internet, right? An encyclopedia has a bunch of information on a bunch of different stuff. And I feel like that's how you could access maybe what you want to even do with your life. Yeah. If you had opened that at that point before the internet.
I like the way you said that.
Yeah.
It was the internet before the internet.
Yeah, how did you get your hands on that?
So back in the day, there were people who sold books, who would knock on the door and, hey, we have this book, this set of books or whatever. And so somebody who was just selling books, going down the street, stopped at our house, and Mom and Dad looked at the encyclopedias, and I mentioned I'm the youngest of 8, so, you know, my older brothers and sisters needed encyclopedias in order to study, and there was also this set of children's books called Childcraft. And so I remember them looking at each other and having a conversation because I was a real nosy kid. Like, we're real inquisitive. I was always in the space. Right? I was very inquisitive.
Nosy.
Okay, not nosy. I was inquisitive.
Both of them.
So I was in that space, like, listening to the conversation. I really remember this. And they were talking about, wow, we need to get it, you know, but they couldn't afford it. They went to a savings and loan. I remember the savings and loan was on East Genesee.
Savings and loan.
Yeah, a savings and loan, which is similar to a bank.
Okay.
And they went there and borrowed money to buy our encyclopedias and Childcraft books. And I remember going with them monthly for them to make the payments at the savings and loan because they invested. And, you know, it's such a great memory because we're talking about generational wealth. And what better way to leave generational wealth for us to allow us access to something that we wouldn't have otherwise been able to access to increase our literacy skills, you know?
Right, okay.
And just, it really helped us think about this whole idea, like you said, of the encyclopedias being the internet before the internet started. It helped us think about stuff we wouldn't have otherwise thought about.
Right.
Because when you open an encyclopedia, I mean, you have access to all these different things,
Gotcha.
right? So anyway, that was one of the things that my parents did. They invested in us. They not only did that, though, they also built relationships with the teachers at school. So when Miss White said something, it was like Mom's sister just said it because they knew that she cared. Yeah. And so they built those relationships. They were part of the PTA and all those things at school.
And Miss White was the teacher who followed. You said she followed you?
Yeah.
How many years?
4 years. She was my preschool teacher, my first, second, and third grade teacher.
Pre all the way up to third.
Yes. And then I had somebody different in the 4th grade who was my Maddie Calhoun. She's actually one of my godmothers, and she's the one who challenged me and opened up my thinking about chapter books. So we had a great library at the school, and they had all these huge, like, thick books, and all the kids stayed away from them. Like, who wants to read, like, a 100 and something or 200-page book? Right. Nobody wants to read that. You want to read the other things that, you know, a little shorter, more fun.
Unless you're really a gladiator and
right.
you want to take that challenge on.
So that's what Miss Calhoun did. She made us become reading gladiators. And this is how she did it. Same tone that Mom had, same tone that Miss White had when they read to their students. We were 4th graders, but she read to us. And I was in this reading class. I remember I had to change classes because during that time there was a special program where they assessed everybody, and depending on what your reading level was, you went to that class. So I'm not bragging, I'm just saying that I was blessed because I had a really great start to be in the top reading class. And that was Miss Calhoun's class. So there were a couple 4th graders in there. I think there was one 5th grader, and everybody else were 6th graders. And so she would challenge us to read, like, other books outside of the ones that we normally read. And one of them was Laura Ingalls Wilder books.
Little House on the Prairie.
Yes.
Oh, my God. I hate those books.
But that's because you didn't have Miss Calhoun to read them to you.
Those books.
You didn't have her reading.
No, every time they brought those out in school, I would just, like, groan.
Right.
It was like, oh my God, it's like 15 pages of the setting. I can't even envision the setting. It's like, you know, the sun arose and kissed the something. So I was like, where's the fighting and action?
Right. But
something.
It was because they didn't read it like Miss Calhoun, I'm telling you.
Well, I didn't read it to myself, right? Because I was not. I'm sorry, that was triggered.
No, that was good. That was
fully
good.
Triggered. But Little House on the Prairie, get that out of here. But But okay, all right.
So but you know what? It could have been that you had different interests too.
No, absolutely. This was different interests.
But there were guys in my class
that liked Little House on the Prairie.
And they loved Little House on the Prairie. And that's because she made it come alive.
I can't
now,
even
the
remember
way
the
that she
storyline.
read, the way that she read to us reminded me. Now, see how I'm making that connection. My mom read it a certain way, Miss White read it a certain way, and Miss Calhoun read it the same way. So in my spirit, this is making things come alive. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, this is what I was accustomed to hearing. And so this is what she'd do. I didn't know it was a trick. But she would read the first chapter, like on Monday. And then everybody's like, okay, are you going to read on Tuesday?
Anticipation.
Yeah. So then she read the next chapter. It's like, oh, man. And she'd say, what do you think is going to happen, whatever? And we're like, I don't know. We're there on Wednesday. Oh, man, can you read again? She'd say, no. If you want to know what happened, go check the book out of the library.
The best shows do that. The best books do that.
Right.
I think, like, for books, when I grew up on Michigan Chillers, they always had a cliffhanger at the end of each chapter. I think Goosebumps did that too.
Yeah.
And then for TV shows, I grew up on Dragon Ball Z, which is like, to me, the best anime of all time. And like after each episode, the best episodes, they're saying, what's gonna happen next?
Right.
Will what's his name? Goku. Will Goku be able to overcome Frieza?
Right.
All of these different things, and it was like those were the reasons that made you come back. And what's messed up about that show is like it would be 10 episodes of like nothing actually. Like it's 10 episodes preparing for the fight.
It's like, when is it gonna happen?
Right, but like you're gonna come back.
Right.
And you're gonna watch that next episode. They knew what they were doing. I like the show.
And by Miss Calhoun doing that,
Yeah.
you know what? That's actually what would happen to me when I was reading alone.
Okay.
Because I would like Heidi or The Wizard of Oz or whatever I'm reading, I would be in the story, right? I would just be right there on the mountain with Heidi, with getting ready to go visit her grandfather or whatever, it was that kind of imagination.
You placed yourself in it.
Yes,
Yeah.
and I think it was because of the way that they read. They actually made you see it. You said you couldn't see it. Mm-hmm. The way that it was read made us see it. And that's so important when we're working with children. But I'm not going to go to that. I'm going to keep talking about my own experience. So anyway, I had a great elementary experience. Backing up just a little bit, in second grade, I was a part of something called Project Bright. And that was a special program where we had the math professors from the college here, the local college, from Delta College, junior college. They came in to explore, there's that word again, to see if second graders could be taught algebra. Mm-hmm. And it was a very successful experience. They actually did teach us algebra in the second grade, and it was not watered down. They simplified it in the sense of helping us be able to understand it. But we had an algebra class, and this was twice a week that they would come into Miss White's class. It makes me think about what an awesome teacher she was, not just because she had the skill set, but she included other people to come in and work with her students to do some other kinds of things. So anyway, we were exposed to algebra, and learned it in the second grade.
Before you talk about your junior high experience, I just wanted to ask a question because I actually saw this firsthand. A teacher, just because of the school that I was at, some teachers left, things like that, different things happened. There was one teacher who taught her 5th grade class, in middle school. And she also taught the same group of kids in the 6th grade. And now she just so happens, because the 8th grade math teacher is leaving, she's going to be able to teach her kids in the 8th. She's super excited about it. And I have never seen a teacher so connected with her students, like the way that she loves them, Does following, in your opinion, does following kids through grades benefit the kids more? And then also just steel manning, like, why might it not? Because for some reason, our education system is set up in a way that, like, we're not following them through. I wonder why. If, like, hearing you say this and then also seeing someone experience this, you know, by luck, but still,
So for Miss White, and probably the teacher that you're speaking of, the relationship building was there.
Right. Yeah.
You know, and so if you have a teacher who's really connecting with the students, and I mean, she loved us.
Yeah.
Like we stayed in touch until she passed away, which was, you know, after I actually got a PhD. So we were together, like, knowing what was going on with each other for like 40 years. And I don't know if she had that kind of relationship with everybody, but I know she really cared about the students. So if there is a teacher with a high level of interest in working with those particular students because they have a great relationship, because they've built a relationship with the parents like she did, and probably the teacher you're speaking of, if they have the desire to continue to work with those students, because sometimes teachers are glad when it's the end of the year. You know, different classes. You're a teacher. You've experienced this. And I've experienced it where, I'm so glad this semester is over, because it just didn't come together in a certain kind of way.
Right.
But when it does come together,
it's beautiful.
It's a beautiful thing, and it will be great if teachers maybe had that option. I don't know if that would be a possibility, you know, in every school district. But some school districts allow it.
Okay.
And in this particular case, the other thing is, if the teacher has the skill set to be able to move to the next grade level, because that's an important thing. You know, to go from preschool, doing the Head Start, and then go first, second, and third, that was a challenge for Miss White. But she was always up for the challenge, and she didn't hold us back. She pushed us forward. And in fact, that's why she wanted to do it. She wanted to make sure that those students who were able to be challenged at a higher level was challenged. So she had us, you know, like a couple of us were reading like junior high books at a very early age. If we were capable of doing it, she would push us forward. And that's a difficult thing, you know, to do differentiated instruction for teachers. It takes a lot to do that.
Yeah, that was the scaffolding that you were talking about.
Yeah.
For the listeners who don't know what scaffolding is and don't have that teaching experience, could you speak to that? Because that's, from my experience, one of the most difficult parts of lesson planning, and like having a operating classroom that is efficient and effective.
Yes. Yeah. So some teachers, because they don't quite understand that this is not a good thing, teachers, some of them tend to teach to the average person. You know, if you have a group of students who are maybe low in reading, you have some who are average in reading and some who are, you know, high-level readers. It's a lot easier to give everybody the same thing.
Right.
I mean, you only have so much time. Teachers have personal lives, whatever, you know. So in order to teach to all three of those levels effectively, it takes a lot of preparation.
Right.
And so the scaffolding comes in where you might have a particular lesson plan, but you have to take that lesson plan and adapt it so that the students who are struggling can have the scaffolding or the support, the additional assistance that they need in order to do what they need to do and move up a level or several levels. The average student that's like maybe proficient in reading, but not necessarily reading at a higher level than grade level, you have to be able to provide certain things for them to move them up, because you want everybody progressing. And then the students who are the really like higher level readers, oftentimes it's easy to ignore them because one may think they're already doing well, I'm just going to focus on the ones who aren't. And that's unfortunate, because then those who are reading at a higher level cannot go higher like they could if you work with them.
Right.
And so they need to be challenged. Every single group needs to be challenged in all areas. And just because they're high level in reading does not mean they're high level in math or some science or some of the other areas. So the teacher also has to think about all of those things when they go to the next subject. So teaching is a very difficult job.
Yeah.
And it's not for the faint of heart.
Absolutely.
You know, especially when you're going to do differentiated instruction. But scaffolding, I mentioned that Ms. White would have a whole reading list and reading materials for me to take home each summer. So that's scaffolding. You know, my mom and my dad didn't necessarily know how to challenge me the way that my teacher did. She knew I was reading at home, and that could have been good enough for her. But no, she wanted me to take those books and look, and they would be challenging. Like they would be like higher level kinds of books. And when I took my time over the summer and read them, but most of the time I was done like after the first month because I loved reading. Right. And so I was like, I got to get Miss White's books done, you know. But yeah, and then when I came back, I would have to report. So that's what scaffolding is. Okay. It's a lot of work, and it's something that needs to happen wherever students are whoever is working with a student. Like in Sunday school, for example, you know, when a Sunday school teacher is working with students, they have to be able to think about the different levels of students and not just teach the same lesson in the same way to everybody.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
All right, cool. So let's walk into
Central Junior High.
Central Junior High.
I'm walking into Central Junior High.
School, you know what I'm saying?
I had to walk. I think it's about a couple miles to school.
Was it always carpeted gym?
It definitely was not a carpeted gym.
It wasn't?
No.
Oh,
no.
Wood floor?
It was.
Let's go.
It looked like a foundry when I started school there.
Oh, I don't know what that is.
It looked like a plant. It was like, it was not. It was not a beautiful school, okay? But it had a lot of love.
Yeah.
So
that's important.
Many other schools are beautiful now, but there's not a lot of learning happening in them. I'm not saying that it can't be beautiful and have a lot of love and learning. Right. I'm just saying I went to school in the hood. I didn't mention when I was talking about elementary, but some of our books at my elementary school and my junior high school had the names of other schools. So we got secondhand material sometimes.
Good old hand-me-downs.
Yes,
I know that hand-me-down life.
And
the youngest.
And it wasn't a good. It wasn't a good feeling. I actually remember thinking, why are we using books from somewhere else? So not to make anybody feel bad, but that wasn't really a good thing necessarily. Gotcha. But the teachers that we had made the most of it.
So then you understood my plight when you were handing down all of my brother's t-shirts and pants. I'm so happy that we now I have this on camera.
Oh, that is funny.
Okay, cool. I always wondered. I'm like, wow, you guys don't feel sorry.
Now hold on.
It's fine. It's fine.
I have to justify
it was
that.
good. The t-shirts looked good still. The jeans did fit.
But remember when you were little?
It was a different era.
No, we were not working.
Right.
We were both in school.
Trying to figure it out.
Right.
I get it.
Yeah, at least they were clean.
The jeans fit. I get it. That's cool. It's all right.
I think we need to go.
They had Morgan and David written on the side. No, that's cool.
That's
the jean,
funny.
I always go back to that picture where we all had the jean jackets and the jeans looking like a 90s R&B cover.
Right,
you know what I'm saying?
Yes.
That always.
But you had your own. That was not a hand-me-down.
That was not a hand-me-down. I felt so special. I thought we were going on tour because I finally had some clothes. No, that's cool. All right, keep going.
That is funny.
Keep going.
Yeah. So. When I entered junior high school, I was very much ready for the challenge. But I did have to walk farther. I just walk like Houghton was 4 blocks from home. And then junior high was Central. So you know how far that was from 13th Street all the way over to Weddock was a couple miles. The walking was interesting. That was the time that we built relationships with other people who didn't go to Houghton. So Houghton, the Jones Elementary kids, and from other places, we would walk together, So back then it was junior high, it was 7th through 9th grade. And in my 7th grade, I remember feeling a bit overwhelmed at first because, you got to change classes or whatever. But my English teacher opened my eyes to something that I wanted to explore.
What's
Back to
her
that
name?
word again, Loisteen Johnson.
All right, cool.
And I'm still in touch with her as well.
Yeah,
In fact, she
Wait,
said,
Miss Johnson?
Yeah, she
Oh,
said
shout out
something
Miss
to me.
Johnson.
She said something to, no, that's a different Miss Johnson
Oh,
that
okay,
you
okay,
know.
okay,
But
okay.
Miss Loisteen Johnson, Miss Meloretha Johnson was my 9th grade algebra teacher.
Gotcha.
And your principal
Yep.
at
That's
your
awesome.
middle school, yes, as well. But yeah, so that's generational wealth, right?
There it is.
There it is. So Loisteen Johnson, who just commented on our Rooted In our Facebook post. Yeah,
Shout out.
she commented on it. Well, she was the person who introduced me to James Weldon Johnson, and she introduced me to Langston Hughes, and not because they walked into the classroom, but because she used all of this African American literature in her English class.
Nice.
And then she challenged us to write poetry and write about our experiences. That was a whole new thing for me because that's not something that I experienced in elementary school. And in fact, in elementary is when I first saw a book with Black characters. My brother, MT, had, he was in college and he was a militant, right? Mm-hmm. So he went to some conference and he brought home all of these books that had Black characters. I took them to the elementary school and everybody was like, where'd you get this from? And so that was a great experience, but I didn't know about the authors until I got into Miss Johnson's class. So she opened up a different, my imagination in a different way. And then moving forward after that, I felt like I was a poet because I was introduced to Black poets, and I wrote some poetry. I won't say it now. I do remember a few of them.
I was thinking, I was going to ask if you remember the
No, we actually used words. She allowed us to use some words that, I won't say those words on podcasts. So
Okay.
Thank you, Miss Johnson. You let me do that.
You had to fully express yourself.
Yeah, I
Tap
fully
into your
express myself. And
creative
the
power.
one that's coming to mind right now is that particular one. So I'll leave the poetry alone for the day. Right. But so in junior high, I continued to have teachers who allowed me to move forward. I had algebra. Rather than waiting until 9th grade, I had already had it in 2nd, remember, so I had it in 8th grade. And then, of course, in 9th grade, I had it again because there wasn't a higher level math, so I just took it again. And that's when Miss Johnson was my algebra teacher. But she was an excellent teacher, so she challenged us. On to high school. In high school, one of my favorite stories to share is that Mr. Roland Pratt, who was my brother MT's teacher and the person who got him interested in going to college. He tells a story about him and some of his friends who were on their way to work at the plant, like all of our fathers did. And Mr. Pratt put them in the car and said, I'm going to take you on a trip, took them to a college, and everybody that he took to Oakland University, where I worked at that time, signed in, and they all went to college there. So my parents had a relationship with Mr. Pratt, and he couldn't wait until that last Thompson kid showed up because he had heard that I was smart and he was ready to challenge me. So every class that he taught, I took it. It was Greek mythology, which was wonderful. That was a different kind of exploration as well. And then I took college writing from Mr. Pratt, and so my voice has changed and my facial expression has changed because that was the first time that I had to really, really work. Prior to that, just like you, Josh, classes were easy. I didn't have to do a lot of studying. I just, things were kind of easy for me. But when I got in Mr. Pratt's class, in that college writing class, he said, I'm going to get you ready. And he had this smirk that was like an upside down smile that he gave. It was like, yes, I got you. You're the last one and I'm going to make you pay. But I remember one particular time that he wanted us to write a research paper. And so we had to use these index cards. Remember, we didn't have computers. I'm really old. Yeah, we didn't have computers back then. So we had to use little index cards and get the information from the encyclopedias or whatever. So we had maybe a month to do the assignment. And about a week before the assignment was due, one of my friends was turning hers in early. I asked to see hers, and I looked at it. I was like, I could do that like the day before to myself. I was like, okay. So the day before it was due, I wrote my paper that night and turned it in. I handed it to him. I was looking at him at the desk, and he walked over to my seat. You know, we had desks instead of the chairs and tables that most people have collaboratively now. We had individual desks. So he walked over to me, and he put it on my desk. And I looked up at him, and he had that upside down smile. And I said, "You didn't grade it?" He said, "I won't accept it." I said, "You won't accept it?" He said, "That's not your best work, and I won't accept it." And I looked at him, and I was like, "But the deadline is today." He said, "I'll give you until next Friday. Do the work." I was like, okay.
Well.
So I had to get those index cards out like I was supposed to do. I rewrote that paper, and actually, for maybe one of the first times, I actually worked to get it done. And when I turned it in, he looked at me. He sat down. He sort of perused it. And I was watching him. I was like, oh, man. You know, I was a little bit nervous about it because I needed my A, right? And finally, he came over and he said, "Now that's your best work." And I said, "Thank you." So, of course, I got an A on that one.
Yeah,
but
that's good.
After that, I wanted to say every college class that I ever took that had to do with English, I aced.
Because you were challenged at that
I
point.
was challenged at that point. He prepared his students. Everybody that took Mr. Pratt did well in their college classes in English, you know. Like, we may have struggled in something else, maybe socially or whatever, but it was never the English classes.
That's good.
Yeah.
Shout out to Mr. Pratt.
Yes.
I'm glad that he gets to have his flowers, you know, get his name immortalized in the internet ether.
Oh, yeah. Mr. Roland Pratt was an awesome man. And then the other great experience that I had in high school was soul choir. And that was a way to bring in our belief system into the school. So we sung religious songs. We sung the same songs that we sung at church. And so all of us from different denominations and, you know, all the different, you know, groups of people who may have been in the choir at their dad's church or whatever church. Like, we all came together, and we have several records out there. So records, imagine that.
Yeah.
Right? We're on YouTube, actually.
Touring high school.
Yeah, we toured. My 10th grade year, we went to 10 different cities. So Saginaw Soul Choir was a big deal. And Miss Miriam McKinney, I just want to shout out to her, because when I got to University of Michigan, I did not have to take the fine arts requirement because of all the experiences I had with Soul Choir. And at my high school, Saginaw High School.
My earliest memories are you playing piano. So
Yes.
Did you play piano for the Soul Choir, or was that?
Oh, no,
just
I wasn't good enough to play for Soul Choir.
Oh, okay.
I was the hymn girl. I could play the hymns, and
Right.
you know, I could rock with you know, some basic stuff.
Right.
But Soul Choir was at a whole nother level.
These are got you. Okay.
Yeah, that was different. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That was good.
Yeah, that was a lot, but you know what? That rich experiences that I had in my elementary, junior high, and high school, like, I give a major shout out to Saginaw Public Schools. Sometimes they get, you know, a bad rap. Oftentimes it's what you make of it. And so I feel that the things that I learned from them mainly was relationship building and learning. I was motivated to learn, and I knew how to learn. And I still know that, and the relationships that I built during that time. You know, I have some of the old teachers from my junior high and high school and elementary working in projects with me now.
Yep.
And it's because of those relationships.
Yeah, I got to hug Miss Atwater.
Yeah.
Shout out to Miss Atwater. That was one of actually Auntie Ola's teachers.
Yes.
And you knew her.
Yes.
And seeing somebody who's still going strong for kids, that's
At 80 plus.
yeah, that's so inspiring.
Right?
That's so inspiring, and at the same time, it's like, wow, your work as a teacher, it's never actually done. You know?
Yes, that's
Like,
right.
You're always still trying to help still trying to make some type of difference. So
generational wealth at its finest.
There it is.
You know, it is about finances, but it's also having a spirit of excellence, you know, or being able to share certain types of materials and knowing how that can open up the imagination for somebody else. So the materials that we use in our project, for example, it reminds me of the way that Miss Johnson, you know, shared certain things.
Nice.
So,
all right.
Yeah.
Let's do some pivoting here. Thank you for sharing about your education and such. I feel like we could have continued to deep dive.
Yeah, it's a lot.
I'm still thinking about, we didn't even get to Granddad, your relationship with him and how that affected your education or just your outlook in general.
Well, I can mention that for a second. So, you know, my dad being a pastor, that's literacy also at its finest. You know, I saw my dad, who only had a third grade education, behind a typewriter on a weekly basis. Like he would
one finger at a time.
One finger at a time, and then once my sisters and brothers were old enough and they learned how to type, sometimes they would type his sermons, or I would type his sermons. Because remember,
he typed his sermons.
Yes, he typed it every time. Yes, he typed them, and
sorry, is this the thing back in the day where you?
Yes. Yes.
Oh wow. Okay.
ASDFJKL semicolon. I was a really great typist.
That's crazy.
Yeah. So literacy is not just reading the books. I saw him reading, you know, but I also saw him writing, and he had to write. He wrote all those sermons, and then the oration of them, the oral language, that's also a part of literacy. And he was a great orator. You know, that he did the black church
the
thing.
Holler,
oh, he could do that.
Down.
Oh, spin around, all of that. All of that. And you know, the thing about it is those experiences I'll say those experiences are the ones that kept me emotionally stable when I had to go off to a predominantly white institution and deal with things I hadn't dealt with before. So I would be so happy to get back to my home church and hear somebody, as they call it, raise a hymn, or hear somebody, you know, speak in our African American language, our vernacular, because it was like a rest for my soul. You know, if that makes sense to you.
No, absolutely.
It's an emotional stabilizer for me to be able to get back to that space.
Yeah.
Even now, you know, in the work that I do and the challenges that I experience in trying to help our children, the church is my emotional stabilizer.
Yeah. The church, Saginaw, that's always going to be like a home base.
Yes.
For us. So I resonate with that. Okay, so slight pivot here. I would like to speak to your research, how it started, where it took you, where it led. You also are the co-author of some books as well. I'd like to take some space so that, you know, we could get to know all of the things. So,
okay.
Yeah. If you would like to start at the beginning of your research, what even motivated you to start it, things like that.
Okay. Yes. I went away to college. I went to University of Michigan and majored in economics. And after I got my economics degree, I was on my way to law school. But when I came home to Saginaw, I was hired by Merrill Lynch to become a financial advisor. So as a financial consultant for Merrill Lynch, I was really making a lot of money. And I rationalized, why would I go away to law school instead of money? Yeah, it was like, man,
you can sell, you can pitch, you can sell, you can sell water to a whale, ice to a polar bear. Is that you who tells me that?
I don't know,
I feel
maybe,
like it is.
maybe. But I was enjoying it. You know, it was great. However, after having David, so I had Morgan. It was easy to just deal with one child and be a financial consultant. I would bring the swing into the office in the evening and cold call, and Morgan was cooperative. But once I had David, now I have 2 children, right? And it became more difficult to come into the office and do all the extra things that you have to do.
Was David noisy? Was he uncooperative?
It's not that. It's just that having 2 children, I think my hold, I just started switching in my thinking because having Morgan and being able to bring him to the office was fine. I wanted to be with my kids, right? Yeah. And so then once I had David, I couldn't do that anymore. And I longed to not be away from them. It was different. So your dad and I decided that it would be okay for me to quit for a while and stay home because I wanted to, rather than invest other people's money, I wanted to invest in my own children. Now, he didn't agree right away, I must say, but I started praying, and eventually he said, you know what, you need to be home with the kids. I was like, you think? Yeah, I think I need to be home with the kids. So when David was 6 months old, I turned in my resignation letter and was able to stay home. And that was one of the greatest times of my life because I was able to do all those things I saw Mom do, that I experienced. She was home with me, so she could do all of those extra things. And then I had you, and so then I had all 3 of you guys just having a great time. I'm taking you to the library, to Children's Hour, you might remember that, and just teaching you music. Hey, we had 3-part harmony at a very early age. You guys knew all of that. So
I remember this.
All of the fun stuff that I was able to do, because I was home with you. And during that time, I started thinking, okay, I got to plan my, entrance strategy back into the professional life because I didn't have any intention of staying home forever. I just wanted to stay home while you guys were in your formative years. And so as you got a little bit older...
Hold on, formative, you mean like...
Early years.
Okay, so by the time I'm in like grade school or preschool, kindergarten, now you're like, I want to transition.
No, before that.
Before that.
I started planning. I've always been a planner.
Okay.
Remember, I asked you, like, what are your goals for the year?
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
So,
absolutely.
Yes, that's why you're so goal-oriented, maybe. I don't know. But, so I started planning. No, actually, when you were born, I said, okay, now I need to start planning what I'm going to do now. I didn't want to go back to being a financial consultant because it would take too much away from you guys. I couldn't do day and night. So I felt a calling, an urge to become a teacher. And I didn't know where that was coming from at first, but I was writing some of the lessons and stuff for Vacation Bible School for the church that we were going to, Mount Zion at that time. And I was sitting in the choir stand. This is actually a vision that I had. I was sitting in the choir stand and I was thinking, the people are coming to the church and they're not getting everything that they need. What is going on? I'm having a conversation with God. This is literally how I was called to teach. And I had a vision of people going to a desert. I was sitting in the choir stand during church, and I saw them coming to the desert, and they saw water. And they came to the water, but it was a mirage. There was no water there. And I said, God, what are you showing me? And I said, you said that they need to seek your face. And he said, they don't know how, teach them. Now, this is a conversation that I literally had with God in the choir stand. And when he said, they don't know how, teach them, I was like, oh, okay. So I'm called to teach. This was, I don't know, I was about 32 at the time. I decided, okay, so I'm called to teach. I know what I need to do. I'll go to the local university and sign up and get my teacher's certificate. I already had an economics degree from University of Michigan. I'll just become a teacher. So when I went to Saginaw Valley State University to get a teaching certificate, the counselor that I ran into, and I wish I could remember her name right now, but her name is at the tip of my tongue, but I can't think of it. She said, why would you get just a teacher's certificate? You need to get your master's. And I said, okay, well, all right, well, how do I get my master's? And so she sent me to another person. They signed me up for the classes, and I started going to Saginaw Valley State University for my master's. I also started subbing at my old high school, Saginaw High, because I wanted to see what it felt like. Am I supposed to teach in high school, junior high, elementary? Where am I supposed to be? So I'm excited. You guys are young. Morgan is now at this point in elementary. David is in elementary. And you were going to the Children's Center at Saginaw
SVSU.
Valley State University.
That was a good time.
Right.
They had some great toys.
Right.
All of that. Yeah, that was
And so when we would say, well, what school do you go to? You were like, to Saginaw Valley State University Children's Center. That was your thing. And people just thought that was just like brilliant because you could speak so well. But so during this time I was exploring, again, that word. You would only be there for a few hours. It wasn't a long time because remember, I'm still home with you.
Yeah.
This is still formative years. But it was good socializing for you to be there.
I remember being on their track field or something like that.
They had a place where the bikes would go around.
Yeah.
And they had,
No, not at SVSU. At Saginaw High, I remember being on the track field for some reason. And specifically, this is a random memory, but like I just remember, did Patty Cake run track?
Yeah, Patty Cake ran track.
So I remember her, like, I raced her, and
we
she,
would
like,
go to her track meet.
blew past me. I just remember that for some reason.
Right.
That's like that is one of my earliest memories from Saginaw High. And then because we were on Elmwood in the backyard, I used to hear and see the football lights. They were high enough that I could, like, see at night. So I would look out from our patio, and I just remember hearing crowds just cheering. All of that. That's
we
like
were
my
like
earliest...
in the backyard, across that railroad track.
Exactly. It was in our backyard, so that's.
Well, see, the reason we were at Patty Cake's track meet is because I was the cheerleader coach. And that's when I met Jackie, your god sister.
Okay,
right?
Gotcha.
And she asked me to be your godmother, and Patty Cake was her little sister, so we would go to all her stuff as well. But I was the cheerleader coach because that was a little extra money. Remember, I wasn't working, so I still had to do some other things, right? And your dad was in school full time at this time, so he was in undergrad, and we were both like doing things on the side to make sure that you guys got fed, right? Nice. So that was a great experience. So I was subbing there. I enjoyed subbing at the high school. I did not enjoy the middle school or elementary. I love teaching you guys, but elementary was not my... See, like, can I go out for recess? It's like you want to say, okay, you got to be good, or you can't go out for recess. But then by the time recess came around, it's like, okay, you know what? I changed my mind. I need a break. Everybody go to recess.
As a middle school teacher of 4 years now, it's
right.
I'd say middle school is the hardest one.
Yeah.
That year at Arthur Hill, that was really smooth to me. Like, if I had good relationships, they're a little more mature. Middle school is hard.
Yes. And in fact, they had me subbing at some middle schools. Now, remember, I'm only 5'1", so I'm about the same height as the middle schoolers, right? Yes. And so, I can command a room and all of that, but they didn't know me like that. Right. So it was a lot more difficult to teach, to sub in a middle school. Mm-hmm. I always say they have elementary high school bodies and elementary minds. It's like they're trying to make that transition. Yep. And so I would share this story with the high schoolers so eventually I told them, only call me for high school. I loved the high school. Mm. I thought for sure I would go get a teaching certificate and start teaching at Saginaw High. Like, that was my goal. And so I was happy with that. And I told the students one time that I don't like teaching in middle school and elementary because in elementary, they have to go out for recess and all that. And so one of the students raised their head and said, can I go out for recess? I know, that's crazy. All right, so back to the story. I'm sorry. But I loved high school. But what I found out when I was at Saginaw High is some of the children who were attending our church, my dad's old church, New Mount Calvary. Mm-hmm. That's where we were at the time. And they were in special ed. They were having trouble. They were looking disillusioned. They hated school. Yeah. Like, this was the same thing that I remembered seeing when I was in my mom's primary Sunday school class.
Yeah.
Because remember, she would say, how was school? What happened in school? And some of the children would say, you know, they hated school, or they didn't have a good experience, or they didn't get along with teachers. And I'm sitting there thinking, well, these are the same kids who are the superstars at church.
Yeah.
Now, how are they able to get up and say an extemporaneous prayer? That requires a lot of thinking, special oral language skills, like, you know, a lot of different stuff to do that. Yeah. Or they're getting up and they'll come up with a particular kind of skit based on a Bible story, and they could act it out. But then all those wonderful things at church, right? But when they got to school, something was happening, because these were like the most at-risk kids at school. So that bugged me. And I started asking questions in my master's class. Like, why is this happening? What would you say about this, and that? You know, whatever was happening that we were reading about, I would ask the questions and take it back to the experiences that I was having. Because remember, I'm trying to figure out for myself this education thing and what kind of teacher I want to be and where I'm supposed to be. Because remember, I'm called to teach. Yeah. So a couple of my professors pulled me to the side. Dr. Alashab, Dr. Meadows. They said, you need to go and get a PhD. I was like, what? No, you need to go to and get in a doctoral program, because you're asking these questions and we don't know how to answer them, but we think it might be, you know, a good research topic or whatever. But you got to go do the research, because we don't know the answers to your questions.
The purpose of the PhD was to do
the research, yeah.
And specifically research on why is there a difference in the student experience of how kids learn in the public school, charter school, private school system versus how they're learning and experiencing learning in church, education in church.
Yeah, and what's happening in these different environments that maybe is causing, you know, like, what is the source of this incongruence? Like, how could the same kid be so successful in one environment and so unsuccessful in the other? Like, what's happening there? And when I would ask those questions, you know, they were like, well, those are all good questions, but we don't know the answer. And, you know, the conversation would ensue in class and, you know, people would add to it. But they told me, we think you have a really good topic. You should go on. And I said, well, I've never wanted to get a PhD. That's never crossed my mind. A law degree I thought about, but I was good on that. And so I said, well, where would I go? So remember, I had an undergrad degree from University of Michigan. But he said, well, you need to go to Michigan State. And I was like, why do I need to go to Michigan State? And he said, because they have a more practice-oriented kind of thinking there, where the things that you're talking about is more related to the way that they think there. I didn't understand it at first, but I trusted their judgment. They were great professors, great advisors. So I said, why not U of M? U of M was a bit different, they said. It was more of a straight line research focus, they felt. Now, since then, I can see that I probably would have been okay at both, but God had the path laid out for me already. So I applied at U of M, at Michigan State and U of M, actually. I did get it both, but I followed up. They wrote great letters. When I didn't even get an interview, they accepted me right away. And it surprised me. But I felt like, okay, this is God's path for me. And my first time going to Michigan State campus, I met my advisor there. And after we picked off my classes, I said, so how am I going to pay for this? And she said, wait a minute, you don't have money?
Debt?
She said, you don't have
Let's
money?
go, loans.
And I said,
Time for that
no.
loan.
She said, your parents? I said, no. My mom doesn't have money.
Man, not the loans.
No, my dad had already passed by then. So
a full ride to the bank.
No, I refused. I was not going to get a loan. That was not an option. I had 3 little children. Y'all had to eat, right? My husband was in school.
Yeah.
So she said, okay, well, let's go see the dean. We went to see the dean, had a conversation. The dean sent me, long story short, over to a department where I explained my story or whatever. And when I left that campus, Josh, I had a full ride, paying for my tuition. I had a stipend, monthly stipend, health insurance.
10,000 in a suitcase.
No, none of that. But they covered everything. Yeah. And it was because they had a special program for people like me. And it was for African-American students, nice. Where if they met the qualifications, they were able to get this special deal. So the first year, I didn't have to work at all. They just want you to, do what you're supposed to do and go to class and get the grades or whatever. And then the next year, you have a GA, a graduate assistantship. And between those years, I met Pat Edwards, my advisor. You know Miss Pat.
Shout out Miss Pat.
Still, yes.
Love Miss
Pat.
And
a secretary introduced me to her because nobody else had done that. So, I always tell you secretaries and janitors are your best friends wherever you are. And,
good wisdom.
And Kathy Lessert said to me, there's somebody you need to meet. You've never met her. I haven't seen you with her, and I want you to meet her. And when I went in and talked to Pat and told her why I was there and what I wanted to do, she said, okay, well, I need to be your advisor. And I switched over to her, and hey, we've been together ever since moving forward. There was a Spencer Fellowship that was made available that second year that I was at Michigan State. And I had not shared with Pat yet that I was interested in looking at the church as a possible site for research. I just told her that I was there to help African-American children do better in school.
Yeah.
That was my pitch. It was just, I'm here to help African-American children do better in school, people who look like me. And so when the Spencer Fellowship came up, I told her, I've been thinking about applying for this. Now, this was like a week before it was due. She said, well, what would you talk about? And I told her my story. I told her about back when I was in Mom's primary Sunday school class, and kids in the class were doing well with my mom, but when they went to school, they weren't having a good experience. And my substitute teaching experience, where children who were in my church were doing great in church, but they weren't doing well in school. They were disillusioned, all these other things they considered at risk. She said, Gwen, that is an awesome story, but you only have a week, and you probably won't win because it's competitive. But you should work on it and put it together. So, after that week, I turned it in, and I did not win. Mm-hmm. And in fact, the person who was over it had a discussion with me, and she wasn't sure. She said, these were her words, that talking about literacy experiences in the Black church is researchable. Those were her words. Yeah. I'm going to come back to that momentarily. So remember that. She said she didn't know if literacy in the Black church is researchable. So fast forward ahead, I was one of the second tier winners of the Spencer. It was called the Research Training Grant at Michigan State. And there were 5 people who won and then 5 people who were second tier. We could attend all of the stuff. Now, the 5 people who won, they got stipends, they got to do a whole bunch of things. But there would be sessions, weekly sessions. And we were invited, the second tier people were invited to those sessions, but we didn't get any money. I think we got maybe $1,500 or something like that, which is way less than the others. They got, I think, $20,000 scholarships for the year. So anyway, Pat told me, go to every last one of those sessions, listen to how they talk about their research, apply it to your own, and next year, upstage all of them. That was her. Mm-hmm. That was her advice. I went into the sessions and I listened to how they were talking, and it's interesting because I'm from the Black church and I'm from the schools that I was substituting in. I was an insider. So it was something that I had to learn how to do to actually research myself, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. Because it's way more difficult when you're thinking about, you're very familiar with something. It's harder to turn on a research eye because you're emotionally tied to it. So I can't talk about it in a subjective way. I have to try to be objective, right?
Yeah.
At least that's the way it was back then. So what I did was the next year, I applied again. And guess what? I won that year.
Got it.
I was one of
Nice.
those 5 people, okay?
Nice.
And I won the next year again. So for 3 years, if you include the one that I was a semifinalist, I was able to sit and talk with people who were doing amazing research, people who were movers and shakers. They had different mentors come in and talk to us and all of that. So by the time I got ready to graduate, I applied for the Spencer Dissertation Fellowship, which is the big one. And I don't know if you remember, but when I submitted that, because we
prayed over it.
We prayed on those papers.
Yep.
I said, put your hands on it. All 3 of you were with me at the post office. We were like, in the name of Jesus. That was a $30,000 scholarship.
Nice.
And that allowed me to not work, but just focus on doing my dissertation. And that was a tale of 2 settings, examining African-American students' experiences at church and at school. And so I have continued to do that work ever since. It's been different sort of entry points that I have made along the way, because initially we were looking at both environments. I had to take time and research those environments separately. And so I have publications and research studies that's just looking at what's happening in the church. And then I have publications and research studies where we're looking at just what's happening in the school. And then, of course, you know, because you worked on one of those projects, that we took it to the community. And so what's happening in the community, and then trying to figure out sources of incongruence across those different environments, because what we want to do is help children be able to negotiate the cultural borders between those environments so that they can be successful in all 3. Now, I have to say, the person who asked me that question or actually made the statement, I don't know if the African American church experiences for Black kids is researchable. At my graduation, at my hooding ceremony, she handed me a card and she said, I don't usually admit this to anybody, but I was wrong, and I'm proud of you. And that meant a lot. It was great for her. Yeah, she did that. But fast forward ahead, and the work, again, has continued, and the work even that we're doing now has, with the Read, Lead, Succeed program and all of that, using Black church pedagogy to teach reading by using community tutors inside the school setting. All of the work that we're doing now that was the beginnings of all of it.
Nice.
And the books, there are 3 books. One of them I co-authored with Pat, my advisor, Pat Edwards, and Jennifer Dandridge Turner, who was one of my colleagues at Michigan State. We were there during the same time in graduate school, and so we co-authored A Change Is Gonna Come, and that's looking at various ways to support the African Americans' experience in school. In that book actually is my dad's story about how we moved during the Great Migration and all of that, and learned to read, and Mom and Dad went back to school. Also, another book is Social Equity Teaching, a book that I co-authored with one of my colleagues. I'm trying to think of her name, Althea Lazar. Nice. Really good friend, good white ally. We're talking about ways that it's important for teachers to not just teach the academics, and Pat is also a co-author on there, not just teach academics, but be concerned about what's happening in the communities of students, because students are not just academic beings. There are many more parts to our children. And so from a holistic perspective, it's important for us to care about what's happening in the community. And then the book that most recently came out with Dr. Arlette Willis and Dr. Patrienne Smith is affirming Black lives and literacies, bearing witness. And so as 3 women who love the Lord, 3 mothers, and 3 colleagues who have developed a close friendship, we wanted to share our experiences about our children, about our experience with students who we've had over the years, and affirm their lives and literacies. So that's the most recent book. And the book that I'm working on right now is Black Church Pedagogy. And that's going to come out probably within the next year.
Nice.
Yeah, so that particular one is like a culmination of all of the work that I've done, looking at what we can glean from the church and utilize in other educational settings, specifically in school. And again, I just want to give a shout out to Saginaw Public Schools because they have been along there with me all the way, and allowed me to work with students in the school district to make sure that we're able to think of ways to do motivating kinds of things that are utilized in the church, different learning instructional strategies and things like that. And so they've just allowed me a space from the beginning. And it's such a great feeling now that I'm saying it, because, you know, people always say, hey, you grow up and come back and bring back what you have and all of that. And oftentimes people aren't welcoming when you show back up at home and try to do the things that you've learned along the way. But I'm so appreciative of the church community, of the educational community. And again, you know, some of my old teachers are working in projects with me. It's such a great feeling to know that you're valued in that way, because that's generational wealth.
Yeah.
You know, they teach you, they nurture you, they raise you, the village does, and then you go out and find all these things. Oh man, there's the train. But we grew up around trains.
Yeah. I say just keep going.
Yeah, so you learn all those things and then bring it back so that you can pass it on to others. So the high school tutors who are tutoring our elementary children now, they're the ones who, a lot of them, you see them, they're just coming alive and grasping.
They like
all
teaching
of it. They
more than
love
they'll
it.
admit it.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Some of them even say, I don't really like kids, but I'll do it for you, Dr. McMillon.
Yeah.
And then you see them come alive. That's generational wealth.
Yeah.
You know, just building that interest for literacy, understanding the value of literacy. Now, we do have to make money as well. I'm about doing that.
Yeah.
But, I shouldn't say but, and not only finances, but we need to build intellectual wealth.
Yeah.
You know, that's important. Like, what are you giving the next generation so that they can be intellectually more wealthy than you were and than your parents were? It reminds me of W.E.B. Du Bois and the talented 10th. And so the thing that I differ with him on is that he said the intellectually talented 10th. But some of my high schoolers are not necessarily top of their class. Some of them are students who the principals recognized had a story to share, and they care about kids, and they wanted to give that to the children because they had a bad experience when they were in elementary.
Yeah.
Some of them said that. And they said, I don't want other kids to have that, so I'm going to show up.
And just so that the listeners understand, my understanding of W.E.B. Du Bois talented 10th is the theoretical concept that we're supposed to take the top 10% who have thrived,
Yes.
if you will, and
Yes.
have them come back to the community
Yes.
after they've gone off to learn the necessary things, and then that they will be the ones who help
Yes.
one, disperse the knowledge, but also just give back in multiple ways so
Yes.
that the community can grow.
Yes,
Right.
and what I'm saying is it's not just the intellectually talented
Right.
that can give that back. It's also the ones who have experienced some negative stuff. You know, they can give back. They can make sure other people are not going to experience that. It could be somebody who's gone off to prison who doesn't want the other people who are coming behind them to go off to prison. And so they share their knowledge and their understanding and their experiences.
Yeah.
That's generational wealth. We want every group to be better off than we were.
Nice. Thank you so much for sharing your research. I have a couple more questions,
Okay.
and I think it's aligned with what you were talking about. For this podcast, I would love to tap on the pillars of what I would consider generational wealth. That would be financial wealth, spiritual wealth, emotional wealth, physical wealth, mental wealth. I believe I said all of them correctly just now. So when we're talking about wealth and literacy's importance on being able to create that wealth, right? If we're not literate, if we're not knowledgeable, how do we even understand those pillars, if you will?
Yes.
According to the Bureau of Labor and Statistics, in a study conducted from 2010 to 2012, Black households had an annual average spending rate of $45.22 on reading.
Oh, my goodness.
Why do you think the investment in education, specifically in reading, is so low?
I think it's because a lot of people don't understand the importance of having those reading materials at home. Some people think of reading as a school activity. They don't think about how important it is to reinforce those kinds of things at home. Or even if a child isn't getting it at school, you can actually turn the light bulb on at home so that they can still be literate and successful once they get out of that particular environment and on to the next grade or in life, period. Literacy is not just happening at school. Right. We have to remember, and I want to say that a lot of our urban areas now are book deserts. And one way you can do it is if you look at the global book desert map, it shows a particular color. And what they mean by book desert is there are less than 100 pieces of reading material, different kinds of material, in a person's home. Now, 100 may seem like a lot to some people, and it may seem like a little to others. But there is no excuse for us not having reading materials, because you can go to the dollar store. You remember every time we went to the grocery store, I would have you guys pick out something on that shelf so that you could take it home. If you can buy food, if you can buy cigarettes, if you can buy weed, if you can buy liquor, you can buy some kind of reading material for your child, like at least monthly, if not weekly. Like, and it can be anything that they like. It doesn't have to, it can be comic books, give them access to the Chromebook and make sure that they're watching videos that are educational. But also, so I think this is happening because people don't understand the importance.
The importance, yeah.
And so I just want to be one of those voices that's crying out to folks saying, hey, literacy is important, and make sure that you have reading materials for your children. And it doesn't matter if it's at one level or another. I know some people say it has to be at their level. But I remember you always wanted to read a book that was above your level. And teachers, some of them initially would say, well, that's above your level. And I would say, well, it doesn't matter. If he wants to read it, we'll read it.
Right, kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just whatever they want to read.
Last question, which kind of ties into all things that we've discussed. When teaching, there are often children that come to us that are traumatized in some format, emotionally, things like that, from the things that have happened to them in their environment, at home, right? They're in school for a certain amount of time, but as you well know, the greatest impact is what's happening when they leave those doors.
Yes.
What are some of the things that you do to get those kids to learn or to love learning, to love education in spite of environmental challenges that, kids are experiencing?
So the first thing that I do, and the most important thing for anybody to do, is to build a relationship. You have to build a relationship with somebody if you want them to learn. There's the old term, you can't teach me unless you reach me. And so I teach that in my classes. I try to live that. All of my, as you know, all of the work that I do, I always tell people you have to love the children. You have to love the scholars. You have to love the adults. So personally, I didn't learn from people that I didn't like. I could sit in a class, I can think of a few of them, like a whole year and not really learn anything because I didn't like the person. So we have to learn that the most important thing, again, is building the relationship. Why is that? Because a traumatized child, and I'm not saying I'm a psychologist, but my hugs matter. So I don't try to.
Great hugs,
right? And you know what? When I walk in the room, what are they doing? Because I tell people I'm a hugger. Now, I know some folks may have, an issue with that. Everybody doesn't want to be hugged. But I've never run into a child who didn't receive my hug. And the traumatized or the non-traumatized. So when they know that I care about them, then they want to do what I'm asking because they know I have high expectations as well. So relationship building, having high expectations, expect that they're going to do well, expect that they want to do right, and then challenge them to do it.
Nice.
I expect, I know you're smart. I care about you. That's the first thing. I know you're smart. Now I want you to show me what you know. And everything you don't know, I'm going to help you learn it. Okay? Let's go to work. And so that those affirmations that we say, it doesn't change that some of them have a negative environment. But what it changes is for the time that we're in a space together. You know that this is a safe space. And I want you to do everything you can to focus in and learn. And
That's
then
good.
when you do that, you're still going to get a hug. And if you don't do it today is a bad day. We all have them. You're going to get a hug anyway.
Nice.
So it's not a conditional kind of love, not a conditional kind of reaching that we do. People talk about culturally responsive teaching, but there's culturally responsive reaching where we have to figure out what's going on with that child, even if we don't know all of the information. But you want to look for the best because there's good in everybody. So I have never run into a child. And I can challenge anybody to bring them to me. When I finish loving on them and hugging them, they will want to try, at least, to do what we're talking about. Unless there's something else going on. I'm sure there may be some kind of issues that a person can have where that won't be the case. I just haven't crossed them.
Right.
Hugs matter.
Hugs matter.
Real hugs.
Real hugs. Real hugs
Right.
matter.
Real hugs matter.
All hugs matter.
All hugs matter.
That's good.
Yes.
Final question. We created our slogan for Rooted In. The original one was Foundation for Legacy.
Mm-hmm.
When you're contemplating and thinking about, your life, your legacy, your mortality, right? We're not here forever.
Right.
I often, just because I'm your son and we're doing a business, I know that, the magic won't last forever. It's impossible for it to. What's your legacy that you would like to leave behind? What's your message that you would like to leave when it's all said and done and, if all things go perfect?
If all things go perfect,
Yeah.
what legacy do I want to leave behind? So I'm going to borrow from my father. He always said, leave the world better than you found it. And so every generation should improve. So Mom and Dad came here during the Great Migration. He picked cotton, she didn't pick cotton, but she was the help, like at the Manhattan Project, who made I think they tried to make the first atomic bomb or whatever. Mm-hmm. She was the help there at 14. So those were difficult jobs, and they came here, and then they invested money in encyclopedias and, childcraft and all that, so that we could do better. And they expected all of us to go to college. And I don't know, we got a bunch of degrees, my siblings and I. Even though Mom and Dad started with a 3rd and 9th grade education, they went back to school and graduated. And so I feel like all of you, my nieces and nephews and my children, should increase in generational wealth, not just financially for sure. So I want to leave behind money. I always tell y'all, when I die, you go cry all the way to the bank because I plan on leaving. I plan on leaving funds, like major money for sure, but also a love for learning. A love for learning so much that you want to share that with others. A love for people to understand that it's your responsibility when God gives you something to always give to somebody else because it's a flowing thing. The more you give, the more you receive. And so God has given us so many gifts in our family. So it's important. Remember, to whom much is given, much is required. And yes, we get tired, We're tired today. We've been running all week,
I'm
right?
hungry.
You're tired and hungry. But here's the thing. It's so important for us to share what we have because God requires us to do that. And not only that, but we're more at peace. It's joyful to share that. And so when I see you and other people in, your age level doing what you're doing, I also, and when I see the high schoolers, the tutors that we're working with, and when I see the elementary students, I know that what I'm doing, that the labor is not in vain.
It matters.
It matters because God called me to teaching. He said, remember, they were in the desert, and when they got to that mirage, there was nothing there. I don't want people to be in that situation where they go thinking something is going to happen for them and it doesn't. I want to be one of those people that's in the desert, giving out the water and making sure that we can dig a pond because we don't want to just pass out water. We want to make sure that it's going to be more water there. You get it. Yeah. Bad metaphor probably, but you get the idea.
No, I understand.
Yes, because we want to teach people how to do it for life rather than just give them it's not an event.
Right.
We want teaching somebody how to read is not just you come and have fun for the day.
Right.
It's something that they can use forever.
And in that same vein, no matter how many millions or billions our family could accumulate, if we just hand off a lump sum and no one knows what to do with it or how to move it or where to invest, how to invest, then that's almost worse than starting at zero. Yeah. Because it'll be a lot easier to destroy yourself.
Yeah.
So.
And, I want to help everybody. I really do. But I really feel that I'm called specifically to help children who look like me because my start was such a meager start. And if I didn't have people like Miss White and Miss Johnson, both of them, and Mom Addie, and, my parents, and Mr. Pratt, other people like that, Miss McKinney, those people, if I didn't have them, then I wouldn't be where I am. So I appreciate people like Miss Vaughn sitting me down in her office, showing me how to fill out a FAFSA, even though my parents didn't know how to do that. So that's important for us to not only reach out to those who already have, because a lot of times that's what sororities and fraternities do. I love my sorority, but sometimes we support those who don't necessarily need it. We need to reach out to the other ones, not just the top, but the others to make sure that, we're pushing them ahead as well. That's generational wealth.
Nice.
Yes.
Well, I do want to say, before we turn the cameras off, Mom, that I love you so much. And
I love you too, Josh.
I greatly appreciate that you've always believed in me and you've always been willing to give to me endlessly. And you're the reason for all of these things that are happening. And I'm so happy that I get to experience this with you.
Yes.
And I love you.
I love you too, Josh.
All right, let's hug.
All right.